Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So if you don't already know, you can probably tell by the title of this video that I am currently getting my master's in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University. I've made a few videos about Pepperdine in the past, and I've gotten a few messages asking about the classes and what it looks like, and I guess what type of classes you need to take. I'm not completely done with my program. I still have 9 classes to take. 4 of those classes are just the clinical practicum, where I'm actually just working with clients. But I thought that I would kind of go through the curriculum and talk about the classes that I've taken thus far. And for those who are thinking about going to school to become a therapist, I thought that it might be interesting to see what kind of classes that you would take and kind of how to maybe prepare yourself a little bit for those. So I'm going to be going through the classes that I've already taken and give like a little explanation about what each class kind of entailed, which ones I liked, which ones I didn't, and which ones I thought were helpful in what ways. So if you're curious, stick around for the rest of the video. So I am doing an online program, which does work a little bit differently from a lot of other schools as far as timing. So just for a little bit of context, I do 11-week terms. And we get anywhere from like 1 to 3 week breaks in between those terms. So it's not like a typical university where you have the semesters and then like Christmas break and then summer. I'm pretty much just going to school all year round. And I am doing my program in 9 11-week terms, which is at a slightly accelerated rate. Pepperdine considers 6 credits for grad school full-time, and that's typically like 2 classes. And I have been doing 3 classes for the majority of my time here, so obviously that speeds it up a little bit. The way that this program works is there's an asynchronous portion to it, so that's where you're kind of watching lectures and doing little assignments throughout the week to like prepare yourself for the live sessions. Once a week per class, you have a live session, which is usually about 2 hours, where you meet with your professors and your other like classmates in that course and just kind of talk more in depth about the material. Sometimes these can be beneficial, sometimes not so much. I like the live sessions when we actually get to apply the material or practice it in some way. So a lot of the classes that talk about like therapy techniques and stuff, sometimes in those live sessions we'll get to like practice those with our other classmates. Sometimes the live sessions are just going over the lecture material again, which can get kind of boring since you already watched it. But just for context, that's a little bit about what my program is like. Now I'll kind of go into the classes that I've taken. It's gonna be a little bit different depending on the program or the university that you go to, but overall there's pretty general requirements. So if you do choose to go to school to become a therapist, chances are you'll be taking fairly similar courses. So in my first term at Pepperdine, they recommended that I just start out with the 2 classes and see how that went for me, and then bump up to the 3 if I wanted to do that, which is what I did. So the classes that I took in my first term were Psych 600, which was diagnosis and treatment of mental health disorders. This was one of my favorite classes that I've taken because it was the most interesting and also like the most relevant. It is kind of bland because you're really just reading through the DSM-5 and memorizing common symptoms and personality traits that commonly link with certain mental health disorders. But if you're going into this field, I would expect that that is really interesting to you. So for me, it was. And it really just gives you like a solid base of understanding like symptoms and stuff that can occur when someone is suffering from a certain mental illness. The other class I took was Psych 612, which was theories of counseling and psychotherapy. This is where you're just going through the main basic theories of psychotherapy. You go through like psychodynamic and humanistic and existential theories, CBT, person-centered, all of like the main ones that you would think of. And this class focuses on how these theories came about, so you're really learning like the history of them. In my second term, I did bump it up to 3 classes. I took Psych 606, interpersonal skills and group therapy, which was probably to this date my favorite class that I've ever taken. I also had a very good professor that I really liked, so I think that kind of helps. You can tell by the title that this is where you start learning how to run group therapy sessions, which is half of the class. And although that was fun, that was not really the part that really got me like interested in the class. It was more like the interpersonal skills side of it. You had to do a lot of personal self-reflection. And before I took this class, I'd like to think that I was pretty self-aware and pretty like in tune with my emotions, but I don't think I was. I think that when you're forced to kind of really explore and answer questions that you never have before, it gives you a ton of new insight on yourself and how you react in different situations and why and how you handle things and what would happen if you handled them differently. And so this was the class that I think really shaped me the most in my journey of like trying to become a therapist, because it really made me aware of how much my actions and the way that I say things and the way I present myself and my body language and everything can affect how someone else responds or how someone else handles their situations. It's kind of overwhelming and scary when you really have to sit down and dissect everything, but it's definitely very helpful and important for going into this field. Another class that I took that term was Psych 622, Multicultural Counseling, and this class just gives you a broader perspective of why it's important to be culturally competent as a counselor. Personally, I love learning about cultures and different traditions and all of that, so I thought the class was going to be more about that, which it wasn't, unfortunately. But the premise of the class was just to inform you about why it is important to explore those things. The last class I took that term was Psych 658, Individual, Family, and Couple Development, I think. It's another one of those classes that's exactly how it sounds. You just study like development from birth to dying, basically. Then moving on to my third term, I took Psych 623, Ethics and Law for Mental Health Professionals. Although this wasn't my favorite class that I've ever taken, I would say it's probably one of the most important ones. It was also a lot more interesting than I thought it would be. I thought it would kind of just be like, these are the laws and regulations and you have to follow them, but it's really a lot more interpretive. I found it very interesting to like hear other people's opinions and how other people would perceive things, but at the same time, it was kind of stressful because the ethical guidelines in therapy are not super direct. I mean, sure, there's obvious ones, but at the same time, a lot of them are very much like dependent on the situation and the client and the therapist. And so it definitely gave me some anxiety taking that class, but for sure one of the most important classes that I've taken. Then I took Psych 637, Techniques of Counseling and Psychotherapy. That one was very similar to the Theories of Counseling one, but like I mentioned, the Theories of Counseling was kind of like the history of them, where this one was actually learning about the techniques and how to apply them. The last class I took that term was Psych 624, Individual and Family Treatment of Substance Abuse. They all have kind of long names and it's hard for me to remember. This class was just learning about different substance use disorders and how to treat them. Treatment for substance use disorders can look a little bit different than it does for other mental health disorders, so that's why there's a whole separate class for that one. Moving on to term 4, I took Psych 639, Couples and Family Therapy 1. There's 2 couples and family therapy like counseling classes, so this was the first one, and I think this one focused more on families and again just kind of like the basic theoretical principles of couple family therapy. I'm not against doing couples and family therapies, but it's not my like top peak of interest. So this class was kind of just a little bit rough for me to get through. Also just not really a fan of like theories classes in general. I think that they can be interesting if it's framed more as a discussion, but when it's just like reading the history of them and it all is very like self-explanatory information. Next that term, I took Psych 627 Psychopharmacology for mental health professionals. This is like the most like biological science class that you will most likely have to take in this program. I think that stuff is really interesting. I've always been pretty interested in like biology and psychopathology, and psychology as a field is very interpretive in many ways. So even when you're taking exams, if you're able to dissect the question, you can usually get to the right answer. I mean, a lot of the exams do have like short answers, or sometimes we don't have exams, it's just papers. So it's really just based on your opinion, and your opinion can't necessarily be wrong. But for this class, there was very much a right or wrong answer. So it's been a while since I've taken a class where I had to study in that way. So it's definitely a tough class. The last class I took that term was Psych 626, Research and Evaluation Methods for Mental Health Professionals. And the point of this class was more to emphasize why it's important to be a research-informed clinician rather than it was like teaching you how to research. Luckily, since I majored in psych, I took a class in my undergrad that taught us all of that, but I felt bad for the people who didn't have that background because I know that they struggled a lot more in this class. In my undergrad class, we had to do an entire research assignment, and for this class, we just had to write a literature review. So it wasn't as stressful, but again, kind of just a bland class. A lot of these classes seem like they could be combined together instead of individual classes. Now moving on to term 5, which is the last one that I've actually completed. In this term, I took Psych 640, which is the second couple and family counseling class. This one wasn't really structured any differently from the first one, other than the fact that it was just learning new theories, and I guess it did go a little bit more in depth. It did add a little bit more of self-reflection and, you know, talking about your own family and how that has framed your thinking about couples, families, just your interaction with people overall. So it was a little bit more interesting than the first one. Then I took Psych 661, which is the preparation for practicum course. In this course, you are really just reviewing a lot of the important things that you learned in school and that you would need to know when starting to work with clients. Also, behind the scenes of this class is when you're starting to look for a practicum site and interview with places. I do wish this class was a little bit more helpful than it was. It's great to have a review of information, but at the same time, I thought that there was a lot of things that I wish the class covered. The last class I took this term was Psych 603, Assessment of Individuals, Couples, and Families. This is probably one of my least favorite classes that I've taken. In this class, you just learn about a lot of the main assessment methods that are used in psychotherapy practice. You're not actually allowed to administer a lot of assessments unless you're specifically trained in that assessment, so it just kind of was a little confusing as to like why I was taking this class in the first place. It was also one of the more difficult classes that I've taken. Like the exams and stuff were very hard. You had to memorize a lot of things about the assessment and on the assessment that I wouldn't have thought were necessary for you to memorize. I don't know, sometimes I think like closed book exams are kind of weird because in the real world you'd always be able to look this stuff up. So yeah, not my favorite class. Those are all the classes that I have already taken. I have 4 more terms left, and in each one of those terms I have the actual clinical practicum class. So that's when you are pretty much working out in the field, and then the class portion of it is reflecting on all of that. You have to do some case presentations, is my understanding of it. And then on top of that, you take 1 or 2 classes. Classes that I still have left are clinical interventions with children and adolescents, human sexuality and intimacy, trauma in diverse populations, mental health systems practice and advocacy, and career development theory and techniques. But yeah, that's a little bit of an overview of the classes that I have taken and what a program like this kind of looks like. Other questions that I've gotten are specifically around the practicum and the practicum process. And since I'm starting that in January, I will film a video kind of talking about what that is like and everything that it entails. So if you're interested, look out for that. But I hope that you found this video helpful, and if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments, or you can always direct message me on Instagram as well. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see future videos, please hit that subscribe button below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.